So I'm recording this screencast to talk about how you automate tasks using Heroku and Rake. This is something I really wanted to figure out how to do. I'm like, it would be so cool if you could write a Ruby script and have it just run automatically every hour. Or, write something that just runs every day without you doing anything. And I'm like, I really want to figure out how to do this. I started looking into it, and I just ran into all this complicated terminology like custom rake tasks and cron jobs, and I'm like, I've only been coding for 6 weeks. I have no idea what any of this means. Like, forget about it. This is like really complicated. But the last couple days, I've talked to a couple people about it. I've finally tried it out, and it turns out it's like the easiest thing ever. Like, getting Ruby scripts to run automatically on a schedule is not difficult at all. It's really simple, especially with Heroku. And I want to just make this screencast to like show everyone like not to be afraid of it. Like, it's actually super simple. So real quick, I am recording this Thursday, August 9th, 2012. I am running Snow Leopard 10.6.8, Ruby version 193, Rails version 327, and my Heroku version is 2.29.0. And if you caught that real quick, I'm recording this Thursday, August 9th, 2012. This is right smack in the middle of the 2012 London Olympics. And I have Olympic fever right now. So I thought, hey, it would be pretty cool to make a medal tracker, right? Like a web application that displays the current medal count and it updates itself automatically every hour. So that's kind of like an idea that I had. I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and make this. And my first thought was like, hey, I wonder if there's a JSON API. And it turns out there is. It's right here on apify.heroku.com. They have an Olympics 2012 API. And, normally if you have access to a JSON API, you're not going to need to go through this whole process of writing a custom rake task that runs itself automatically. You can just, use the JSON API, and then whoever wrote the API, it's their responsibility to update their database. But sometimes it might be useful to write a custom rake task, right? What if you wanted to log the database every hour and then update it? So you wanted to keep a log file of it because maybe you wanted to make an animation of like how each country's medal counts had changed by day, right? Or like, what if you didn't have access to a JSON API? Like, for example, I want to make an NFL statistics tracker, right? Like NFL.com has all these stats, but they don't have an API. So you need to write Ruby scripts that scrape the stats off of the website, and then you would need to run it automatically every hour or so if you wanted to keep your stats updated. So even though like in real life you would probably not go through this process if you had access to a JSON API, I think it's going to be a good example to just show you the process of how you do it. Like, even if it's not necessarily practical, I just think it's a good way to convey the point I want to make. So I'm going to be making a medal tracker using a custom rake task and using this API right here. So let's get to it. First thing I want to do is I'm going to create a new Rails app. Rails new, I'm going to call it medal count with an underscore. And the first thing I'm going to do is something I just recently got in the habit of doing, and I highly encourage it, because that public/index.html file always screws me up. Let me cd into my medal count, and let me cd into public. This index.html file always screws me up because like it automatically roots to it, and I sometimes forget about it. So I'm just going to remove it. Like, I'm just going to get rid of it. Then I'm going to cd back, and then I'm going to create a new scaffold. And my scaffold is going to be based on what this API is. So the API returns just a country, and then it has all the information about them. So I'm going to make a scaffold called country, and I'm just going to use the same field names that I'm going to get from the API. So I'm going to generate a scaffold. That's my shorthand for it, and it's going to be called country. It's going to take a rank as an integer. It's going to take a country name as a string. Then it has gold integer, silver integer, and bronze integer. And then it also is going to have the total medals each country has won as an integer. So that's my scaffold. Let me create it, and then I'm not going to forget to rake db migrate because I always do, but I remembered this time, so that's good. And now I deleted my public index HTML file, so I need to open this in TextMate and just change the routes real quick. And let me just route to countries index. And now if I start my server, let's get this folder cd metal count. So I should be able to go to localhost 3000 and see my scaffold. Alright, awesome. I got my countries, rank, country name, gold, silver, bronze, total. Great. So I'm going to make a script right now, and my script is going to update this database. It's going to be a script. It's going to be a Ruby instructions to just update the database using that JSON API, and I want to run it every hour. Every hour I want this script to run. And the way you do that is you create a custom Rake task. So let's go to TextMate. And let's venture into the lib folder. This is like my first time in the lib folder. It's got two things, assets and tasks. Tasks seems like a good place for custom Rake task. So I'm going to name this what I want it to do, which is update the metal count. And I'm just going to, instead of .rb, I'm going to name it .rake. So you name Rake task .rake. They're still Ruby, right? Like TextMate interprets it as Ruby. It's like, yo, you can write Ruby, but it's just a .rake extension. So the way you create a Rake task is you literally write the word task, you name it, right? Update metal count. You give it a code block, and you just like your code goes here. And that's it. That's a custom Rake task in its simplest form. Like I just created a custom Rake task. But it's not exactly that simple. There's a little bit you need to know about naming conventions. So let's go back into terminal and let's run the command rake-T, right? What this does is it gives you a list of all the Rake tasks that you currently have available. And you see the word rake, then there's a word, a colon, another word, a hash, and then a sentence. So what does that mean? It's really simple. Rake just means that it's a Rake task or a Rake file. I mean, that's what I would assume. Then this next sequence of letters that's before the colon is what's called a namespace. A namespace is basically just a category, right? Like, so these are DB. This is in the database category essentially. And you can actually look up like what tasks are available in a given namespace. If you do rake-T and then pass the namespace in. So say I do rake-T DB, this is going to return all the DB namespace items I have to work with. So all the tasks that are of the category DB essentially. After the namespace is the actual name of the task. So what we put right here, update metal count, that's the name right here. And then this hash sentence is a description. So when you make a custom Rake task, you need to give it a namespace, a name, and a description. So the way that we give it a namespace is similar to the task. You just do namespace, and I'm going to namespace this ABC, which is what I call all my custom Rake tasks. It stands for AlwaysBCoding, and it's also good because it's like normally the first alphabetically, which I like, because it makes it easy to see the things that I've added. And then I'm going to give it a description also. I'm going to say this deletes. So it's going to actually log the database, delete the database, then update the database. So that's what my task is going to do. It's going to do three things. It's going to log the current database, then it's going to delete the current database, and then use the API to update the database. And I want to make this task, and then I want to make it run every hour. So as for the logging the current database, I'm actually just going to ignore that. I don't really want to write that script right now. I just kind of want to write just the bare minimum to show how this would work in the real world. So deleting the database is simple. I can just do country.destroy all, and then whatever's in the database is just going to get axed. And then I need to write this script right here to use the API in order to repopulate the database based on what the current metal count is. So I'm using JSON, so let me require JSON and require open URI. Remember, you have to do this every time you're gonna use JSON to parse something. Let's go grab the URL from this site. It's gonna be, if I click on here, this is the URL that actually has the JSON data, the actual API. So let me copy that. Go back over here, and URL equals open this dot read. Remembering back to a couple days ago when we learned how to do this, then data is going to equal JSON dot parse the URL. So I have the data, and then I'm going to run a data.each do as JSON country. C equals a new country instance. And then I'm just going to use kind of the exact same syntax. So c.rank is going to equal the JSON country rank. So if we look at the API, right, it just has a hash with the rank as the key, so I can do that. Let me copy some of these down. C.country name I called it, but in the JSON thing it's country. Then we have gold, which is the same in both. Silver, bronze, and total. So that's going to create for each JSON object, it's going to create a new object in my database. Then I just need to save it. So that's the script right there. That's going to destroy my database, and then it's going to repopulate it with the current information. And then I'm going to do one last thing, which is when this rake task is done, I'm going to have it put out, "It worked, yo," so I know that it worked and that it did something. So if I ran this rake task right now, rake ABC update metal count, I'm going to get an error message. It's going to say uninitialized constant country. And I'm going to like, wait a minute, I created my scaffold, right? Like in my app folder, in my models, I have country. Like, you're just wrong, computer. But it turns out the computer's never wrong. The problem is that Rake doesn't use Rails by default. It doesn't know about Rails. You have to tell it, yo, by the way, load my Rails models into the task that you're doing. And the way you do that is right after a dependency, you pass it a hash, after the task name, you pass it a hash rocket, and then you write the dependency. Like, what is this task dependent on? You can pass it an array of all the things it's dependent on, but I only need one. It's my Rails environment. And if I just give it environment, that's all that you need to do. So now it has all my models. So this rake task should work. And we know how to run a custom rake task, right? Like, if I go right now to rake T, I'll see right here, my task exists, right? It's in the ABC, AlwaysBCoding namespace, update metal count. This is what it does, and we know how to run it. You just write rake ABC update metal count. That's all that it is. And look, it worked, yo. So did it actually work? I don't know if I believe it. Let's go to localhost 3000, let's hit enter, and boom shakalaka, look, just like that, I have all my countries and the current metal count. I mean, like, there's no CSS, but it's the default scaffolding, but there it is. Like, this task deletes the database and it puts in the, the info from the API. So that's all that I need, right? Like, I have a rake task. I made a custom rake task. It was really simple, and it creates the database. So now I'm like, I want to make this run automatically. How do I do it? First things first, let's upload it to Heroku, which is the bane of my existence normally, but I mean, let's go ahead and try and hope I don't screw it up. So git init, let's make a git repository. Git add all, oh, you know what? I shouldn't even do that yet, because I need to modify my gem file, right? You gotta make this group development, do gem SQLite, group production, do gem PG. So now let me git add all, make sure it's all added, okay. Then I need to, you know what, I shouldn't have even done that yet. I'm so bad at uploading things to Heroku. I need to bundle without production, because I don't have the Postgres gem installed on my computer, so like I need to do this. And then I can git add all, git commit, first commit. Alright, cool. Then it doesn't know about Heroku yet, so let me log into my account, Heroku auth login, AlwaysBCoding at gmail.com, and I enter my password. And I think, right, so now I'm logged in, I can do Heroku create. That's going to create my Heroku Git repository. I think that actually also adds the remote repository automatically to my Git remote. Yeah, see, look, the Git remote Heroku is added. So if I go Git remote v, I have the Heroku Awesome. Let me git push Heroku master, and let me upload this data up to Heroku. Okay, and it worked. So let's go over now to the My Apps page on Heroku. I see I have my application. Let me get the URL for it, click on it. And it doesn't work, obviously, because I didn't migrate my database on Heroku. So I can do Heroku run Rake db migrate. And that's going to run the Rake db migrate. I have a deprecation warning. And there's my app. And, you know, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Rake db migrate. Hey, that's just a Rake task, right? And we know how, like, that works kind of now. I wonder if I do Heroku Rake run Rake T. That'll give me all the Rake tasks Heroku knows about. And because, you know, like, that was in my tasks file, like, when I upload it, it knows about my custom Rake task. It's like I know how to log the database, delete the database, and update. Remember, I wrote that in Ruby. So Heroku like totally knows about my custom Rake task. So let me run it. Let me Heroku run Rake ABC update metal count. And it worked, yo. Like, that's all there is to it. You can run Rake tasks from Heroku, and there's my database. There's my metal count, you know, updated. So, like, the Heroku knows about the Rake task. The Rake task updates the database. All I need to do now is just tell it to run, you know, at a given interval. And that could not be simpler, right? If you go to Heroku and you just go to add-ons, they have an add-on just on this page called, where is it at? Right here, Heroku Scheduler. Run scheduled tasks every 10 minutes, every hour, every day. So, like, I want to learn more about that. I'm going to freaking learn more about that. Free, I like that, and add. Like, that's all there is to it. Now, the one thing, though, is that with the scheduler, if you use it too much, you do actually have to pay for it. Now, too much for our purposes at Code Academy is literally irrelevant because, like, I wouldn't even know how to use it too much if I tried. Like, I could run it every, like, second probably and, like, not use it too much. But Heroku does need you to authenticate, like, that you're a real person, that you have a billing address, in case, like, you went over your dyno hours, whatever that means. I have no freaking clue what that means. But, like, for all intents and purposes, it's completely free. So I already authenticated my account, so I'm going to hit select. And, like, it's just going to appear right here, and, like, your add-ons. Like, add-ons right here, Heroku Scheduler. I'm going to click on it. And, like, dude, I love this. There's a graphical user interface for this. Like, I don't even need to worry about this from my command line. Like, this is, man, I love this. Let me add a job, and, like, no way. It can't be this easy. But it is this easy. Like, I just schedule when I want it to run. I'm, like, every 10 minutes, hourly. Like, I want it to run hourly on the hour, so I go give it the 0. The one annoying thing is that, like, this is UTC. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what the frick is UTC? Like, why can't I just make it Central Time? I don't know, but I'm saying run every hour. And what do I want to run every hour? Rake. I want it to rake ABC update metal count. Like that, I want it to run that Rake task just every hour and just hit save. And that, like, that's it. It's done. Like, that's all that there is to it. You would think it's like this super complicated thing, but just with this Heroku scheduler, I just gave it a task, Rake ABC update metal count, and now it's just gonna run that every hour. Like, I made this custom Rake task. It just says update my database, and, like, it just is gonna now run it every hour. So if this were like a more complicated thing, I had to screen scrape data, you know, put out an HTML file, log a CSV file in the database, I could just make a task to do it and tell Heroku to do it whenever I wanted. Like, that's it. That's all that there is to it. Like, I thought it was this really, really difficult thing, and it's really simple. So I have my beautiful metal count working now. So, I mean, that's all that there is to it. I hope that helped you. And, like, just, there are some things that seem like they're super complicated, but in reality, like, they're not that difficult. So just don't be intimidated when you read, like, fancy lingo. Like, there's kind of like this rule of thumb I've discovered. Like, when programmers say that when something seems difficult, and like there's all this terminology, like it's probably actually really simple and you're just getting intimidated. It's when programmers say that things are easy that you need to be afraid, because that's normally when they're pretty hard. So hopefully that helped you guys out, and remember, always be coding.